You're listening to The Coaching Divas, a podcast for everyone navigating the twists and turns of corporate life.
Follow along as we chat through common workplace situations and extend the coach approach to help you handle them with ease.
We offer a cross-sectional view that spans generations, positions, workplaces, and lifestyles.
We're your hosts,
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, and we are
The Coaching Divas.
Welcome back to The Coaching Divas, where we unpack the future of leadership, work, and the human edge that drives real results. Today, we're diving into a topic that feels almost radical in our metrics-obsessed world: leading with soft power. Because let's face it, spreadsheets and dashboards might tell you where the business has been, but empathy, intuition, and connection, that's what tells you where it's going. Our guest today knows this better than most. Azin Tabrizi began her career in biotechnology and consulting before taking her entrepreneurial drive into the startup world. She went on to found a specialty pharma company, serve as the COO of a social video platform, and today she's the owner and CEO of a security engineering firm. In every chapter, she's proven that leading with heart is not just compatible with high performance, it's a competitive advantage. So stick with us, because this conversation isn't just about leadership styles, it's about redefining strength for the next generation of leaders.
Thanks for joining us today, Az. It's so great to see you. We wanted to open up with a question. What does leading with soft power mean to you personally?
That is a very great question. I think for me, leading with soft power is honestly not something I ever labeled it as. It's something that I've always responded to when I had managers. When I was working my first jobs, the managers that had that sort of empathy towards me is the ones that I responded best to. And I just modeled myself after them. And now that you're calling it leading with soft power and I reflect back on it, I'm like, yeah, that's what it was. That's what I was responding to. But it was honestly, intuitively, I was attracted to that type of manager. And because I thrived better in that type of environment and I worked better in that type of environment, that is what I wanted to be when I would become a manager later on in my career.
I can say I actually never really thought of it as leading with soft power, but now that completely resonates with me because, number one, I'm thinking of all the managers that I wanted to work with that I didn't have the opportunity. And I think that was the quality that stood out for me because people loved working with them and being on their teams. And I was always trying to figure out, how do I get there? Because I'm not happy where I am. What about you, Claudia and Misha?
I think it's interesting because leading with soft power is also a new term to me. And it's interesting because in the past, I think those quality traits were almost seen as a weakness. It was seen as, oh, okay, they're too touchy-feely, or, oh, they're too personal. And people almost put that negative lens to it. And so to bring it and phrase it in a way that really is a power, it is something that sets leaders apart to the point where you want to be on their teams. You want to emulate their style. It builds such a deeper connection. It's also, to me, leading with soft power, a new term, but very valuable.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't a term I heard in my early career, that's for sure. But certainly once you start to see the empathy coming out and the fact that your manager actually cares about the work being done, it puts a whole different lens on how you approach a workday. And I'll be honest with you, I think I first saw it with some of my male managers, not always my female managers. Because I think with male managers, you have a different tone about them. And I think, again, having worked for over 35 years, back then, I mean, women felt they had to be strong, they had to be just like the men, and they had to work harder. So they were probably tougher than some of the male managers that I had. And it didn't always work. So when you did see some of this empathy coming out, I'll be honest with you, I first saw amongst my male managers and I realized what I enjoy working with him more than working with her, when theoretically I should enjoy working with a woman more so than with a man. But maybe certain men had come across this idea earlier. And then women are starting to understand, you know what, I don't need to be super tough or super aggressive or just hold people on the line all the time. Empathy coming out really does produce better results. in the long run.
I guess as when you think about what emotional intelligence means, how do you bring that into your high pressure environment like security?
Yeah, it really comes down to empathy. Like in the security world, like in my role in my company, I am basically the face to the client. And I'm also the one who is protecting my team in a sense, and ensuring that they're happy. So I'm always the mediator in a sense, or the buffer between the client and my internal team. And having that emotional intelligence or empathy for the different groups and their different interests has been very critical under high pressure situations. Like understanding where the client comes from and why they need this yesterday, and then going back to the team and relaying that message in a way that makes them understand where the client comes from, but also makes them understand, I have your back. I understand that I'm asking way too much from you, and I am going to go back to the client and manage that expectation. But can you please step up and do this for me, kind of thing, that kind of scenario. Because otherwise it really creates this us versus them versus a collaborative partnership as a service provider that we are in the security industry. And the only way I think that you can really navigate those waters without escalating a stressful situation is by empathy. I think in a situations like that, when you approach it in a more traditional sense of bureaucratic and hierarchical, because I said so, structure, it actually creates more friction, more stress. People burn out. People walk away. They just don't care, at that point. But when you show that you care for their interests, whether it's the client or the team providing the service, they really go above and beyond what even your initial ask was. They always surprise me at how much more they do when I approach it that way, and how much better I can manage the client's expectation as well if I truly put myself in their position and be like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, but let's be reasonable here. And I think that has actually been the reason why our company has been successful, because the client always feels that I'm going above and beyond for them. And yet my team feels I always have their back at the same time.
That's powerful. As you were sharing, I, one, completely agree. Two, I see how that's shown up in my own experience as well, where sometimes it doesn't need to be a grand gesture. Simply saying, could you kindly, and then whatever you want to ask the person, or if they deliver something that's above your expectations or quicker than you expected them to reply to you to a message, it's just being able to say something simple like thank you, or, I appreciate you getting back to me so quickly. Those small words, it takes such little energy out from a leader to just be able to say thank you, or could you please, instead of just right to the point. I appreciate you for XYZ. It doesn't take a lot of energy, but it pushes the relationship so much further.
Yeah, it's the notion of give them honey rather than crap to make them want to work with you, right? I mean, I don't like to use that analogy, but what also is sparking for me is this idea that we as employees will be reporting into somebody. It's also good for us to share with our leaders some of that. I'll call it soft power, but to say, hey, thank you for making me feel this way, or thank you for giving me that opportunity. Or if you know that your leader is going into a high profile meeting where they have to, present to a client, justify why they have these metrics, actually drop your leader a little comment to say, good luck today. I know you do great. Because there's that reciprocal behavior that you're reinforcing that empathy, not only coming towards you and down, but also up, right? Now you're creating, I'm going to use the word, a feel-good experience for everybody as well.
Yeah, you're creating the environment that fosters that amongst the whole team. It doesn't just have to be from a leader to the rest of the team. It can be the other way around. And I'm sure as a leader, it's appreciated because it gets lonely. The higher up you go, you get less feedback. And so for somebody to be able to be thinking about you in the same way, it creates that environment.
I know I tried to have that management style myself when I was working, and I found it creates a sense of a proper team. It's not that, all this pressure is on me. Because I'm sure when you ask your team member to do something, I'm sure you also said, is there anything else I could do to help you? I will be there to proofread your this, or I'll bring someone along who has this technology that can help you along the way, kind of thing. So it creates more of a sense of us as opposed to a sense of just me and everything sitting on me. And so you know that you're kind of all in it together. So you'll succeed together. And so that's a much more powerful feeling than thinking that, oh, everything lies with me. What if I don't do this? Blah, 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 blah. That tension and anxiety hangs in.
Yeah, I think it's like you guys have touched on based on it is that style of collaborative leadership versus just being a leader and being in this sort of hierarchical structure that I'm up here, you're here, and I'm dictating to you what to do. And I do believe that if you set that tone as a leader, that sort of behavior trickles down, that sort of like empathy and that reciprocal like thank yous. And it's the little things, as you mentioned, Misha. It's not like, let's have a team building activity today after work. It's not that. It's the everyday moments when you have that opportunity to be like, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? I realize you have a lot on your plate. Is there anything I can do to help? You know, that kind of feeling of easy flow conversations costs a lot more genuine than the ones that are very much so structured. And I think people pick up on that. You know, I think employees, when it's like, oh, now they're asking us to go do this activity after work, like, okay, whatever, I'll show up. They're telling me it's a networking thing, it's a team building thing. Well, I don't believe teams get built that way. Teams get built on the day-to-day activities and those communications, whether it's like, you know, pick up the phone, not just by email, you know, those sort of personal touches, or just now that we're going back to work more, like hopping into like the person's office or cubicle and be like, hey, how's it going? That kind of moments are so important in building that culture, because culture is built on little things. It's not built on an activity. I do believe in that.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
I agree.
I'm really curious. We touched on, autocratic style doesn't work, but autocratic style delivers the metrics and the KPIs. So how do you reconcile that?
So yeah, this type of soft touches are not measurable. You cannot do it in a black and white way. But the way I look at it is that they are the foundation of what produces the KPIs results. If you don't have that, you're not going to get the KPIs. If you are in an environment that is toxic, that it's like, that doesn't feel like you're appreciated, you are going to do the bare minimum just to make the day go by and get the hell out of there. That's basically the attitude that a lot of employees take. If not, if anything, they might actually leave too. So depending on how negative that environment is, like whenever you ask a person, why did you leave a certain job? The first thing they say is my direct manager's behavior. It's never my pay. It's never my benefits. It's the direct manager's behavior and the relationship you have with that direct manager, right? That is usually the key response back of why you leave a certain job. So with that in mind, I really do believe that if you don't have that foundation of an environment that is safe, that it feels like you're part of the team, that you have that sort of empathy, not only from the leader of the company, but amongst your team members, that's like when the KPIs really start producing, like, and showing up the way you want them to show up as a company owner. But more so than that, is like, it's not only like what you're doing as the leader, but I find that they start reflecting your behavior. Like the number of times that I've had team members come to me and tell me, hey, so-and-so, they're really stressed out. Like, I think there's a lot on them, like work-wise, or there's something going on with them personally. I don't want to tell you you're the boss, but there is something going on with them. Can you keep that in mind as we move forward with this project? That has happened so many times in my case, and me going and speaking with that person, like, hey, how are you doing? And addressing that early on before it really starts showing the consequence of that person being in that mindset in the work itself and the KPIs. You address it early on, simply because I had that awareness, simply because that coworker had that empathy of understanding that this was happening and bringing it to my attention. That in itself is what makes you successful, is truly understanding where people are and where their mindsets are. So I really do believe it's the foundation of how you get those KPIs. Unfortunately, they're not measurable. Not that I've seen, like we've tried many times with my HR person figuring out how do you measure that kind of things. Like it's very hard because it is so subjective. But at the same time, I have to say, without it, you don't get the black and white KPIs. You won't get that.
I feel like it's immeasurable, but if you look at it over a period of time, in my experience, I've seen, when you have that autocratic leader, your team is delivering based out of fear. And oftentimes they're delivering to the exact thing that they have to and nothing more. Whereas that softer style creates so much psychological safety in a team that they have trust that, okay, you know what? I know you want me to deliver this and I will, but I also have this other idea that could push us a little bit further, and they'll bring that forward. And I think that's where, if you were to measure it, let's say over time, you might be able to say that, hey, a team that has a leader that approaches and has the balance and brings that soft power can actually take the team further in the long run with the same people, not having that turnover, not having people leave because they disagree with their manager or they don't like their manager's style. And so I think the measure really comes over time in terms of where the team can take whatever the deliverable needs to be.
I think the other layer to that, at least from what I've seen with the teams that I've led in delivery, is whenever I've created that experience where we're here to help each other out. So even when I was a project leader, if things needed to be done where we had an issue that had to be resolved, it's all hands on deck. Danielle is going to get therein and test the solution. Danielle is going to help support them through that late night that we're coding or fixing bugs. It basically almost creates like a camaraderie. Like to me, I like to use the analogy of a ship. The captain is the captain, but without the crew working with the captain, you can't fight the tide. You can't fight the waves. You can't deal with when the boat's kind of teetering to the left or the right. I mean, some of the best examples I use is when I've watched ships that are competing in sailing competitions around the world. The best winners are the teams that are so trusting each other to know that they've created that. I'm going to use the word well-oiled, but it's not well-oiled. It's I trust you, you trust me. And it taps into what Misha kind of talked about, the psychological safety of I know that we can rely on each other. And that really does come from this idea of I understand you. You understand me. I feel safe to tell you what's going on. And I love the example you gave about how people are actually already intuitive to their own team. And that to me is a reflection of we worked together for so long. We understand when something's off. It's not just Daniela couldn't handle X today. It is really creating that support. And for me, I think that is some of the most wonderful things to see. And I think for our listeners, as you're reflecting on this conversation, take that into your own workplace. How can you show up as a better leader, regardless of your role? But what can you offer to somebody else today? What kind of kindness can you offer? What kind of thank you can you offer? What kind of acknowledgement can you offer in the smallest way to help shift that culture even within your own ecosystem that's there? I think that's one thing I did want to highlight.
Daniela, just to build on that, ultimately, I think you want to be treated the way you treat others. Like, what do you respond to? Ask yourself that question and do the same for someone else. It's as simple as that. At the end of the day, we're all craving the same things as people. It's like you want to be treated this certain way, do the same thing with your peers. If you respond to that, trust me, they'll respond to it too.
Through all these discussions, the one word that kind of keeps popping into my mind is the word belief. If you believe that you can do it, if you believe that your teammate has your back, if you believe that as a team together you can steer that ship in the right direction and you'll move forward, it's going to happen. So just having that same sort of correct mindset of believing that you'll be successful and that you'll move forward, it's going to happen. You're not going to think about, so-and-so didn't help me last week, so I'm not going to help them this week. Well, maybe that person had a bad situation going on and they just weren't there. So believing as a team that you can go forward speaks volumes, and just having that mindset that you will be successful helps incredibly.
How have your clients responded to this style? How do they deal with you? If I say it in the most polite way possible. Because we know that security is a certain type of industry and certain type of culture in and of itself.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's very much so a traditional mindset, a hierarchical mindset. I mean, most of the people in security come from a background of guarding or policing, which is all very much so hierarchical style of leadership. I tell you to do this as a soldier, you do it. You don't question me, right? And yeah, in a military setting and whatnot, that is what's needed, 100%. But that's the kind of leadership they bring into the security world, which is a very difficult mindset to shift. There's a lot of skepticism when they see the way I am. Like, I come across very soft right off the bat. I'm very personal and very soft and very smiley. Like, being smiley is unusual. It's working hard. Even a simple thing as smiling a lot as a leader it's something that is not a common place. But I mean, it is changing very slowly. And it's something that Claudia touched base earlier on, where the woman who, before myself, who broke that sort of glass ceilings in this industry, had to be extra tough just to break those glass ceilings. And this new generation of women, we're so lucky that we had them do that for us, that allows us now to embrace that softer side as we move up. So I see them as the forerunners of women getting into that management, and I respect them for that and what they have achieved. But they have a much more of a harder style of management than I would want to have, right? So it's sort of like taking baby steps, starting with the ones that break the glass ceiling just to get themselves through the door as women in a leadership position in an industry that just recently now we're around 20% women. It used to be 10% women only in the industry around 10 years ago. So we're getting there very, very slowly. And that's as a whole, by the way, not just, I'm not talking about management level, as a whole in the industry. That's how few women were in it and are in it. Yeah, there's a lot of skepticism. I have to say that there has been cases where I've hired staff members that come from that mentality and that world. And it's interesting, even though they know coming in, obviously I'm interviewing them, they know they are going to be reporting to a woman. And they are like, oh, like, you know, they're obviously comfortable if they're taking the job. And yet it was a terrible fit. And it was like, there was quite a few cases where within a year, they just couldn't sort of shift gears of understanding a leader that is not going to dictate to them, that's not going to micromanage them, that truly my way of managing people is with trust. And in their mind, it was just like a sign of weakness. Or in some cases, they would take advantage of that and start cutting corners in how they're doing their job, thinking, oh, she's not going to notice. Like, she's so soft, like, you know, she's just going to go ahead with that. But it's like, being soft doesn't mean that you don't have awareness, that you're not picking up on people who are not performing or who are taking advantage of a situation or who are mistreating colleagues, that you don't appreciate that tone of voice or that style of collaboration. But as far as clients are concerned, it takes a little longer to build their trust in a team led by a woman. But ultimately, over time, as you produce, they start really respecting you. The results speak for themselves.
So what I'm hearing you saying is, don't park the soft power, but when you're dealing with certain types of clients, you have to adjust your style perhaps to suit the client, but ultimately you still want to live your own true authentic self. Is that fair?
Yeah, to some extent, yes, 100%, especially those first impressions that you make with them. You go in obviously with a different demeanor as far as, like, you know, you're pitching basically. So you adjust yourself to what the expectation of the client is with the way you speak, with the way you present yourself. 100%. You have to have that. That is part of an EQ, understanding what that client expects and adjusting yourself to that. But as you develop the relationship with them, they appreciate the fact that you know their needs before they even know them. That's what EQ comes through afterwards. So in the beginning, you adjust to what their expectations are. Over time, you show it as a strength, and then they build that loyalty with you.
I'm curious if in the clients that you've had longer partnerships with, if you've seen your leadership style reshape theirs in any way, or if you've seen how that softer approach shifts how they now come to you versus when they first did.
Oh, 100%. I've had clients come to me and tell me, like, I really love the way you lead your team. Do you have any pointers on what I can do to build that sort of environment internally for myself, right? Like for their internal team. And it's interesting how, like, you end up like doing mentorships for clients at times.
Like, wow, that's powerful.
It is.
And from that, also developing friendships from it as well. I think that's one of the things that was very unexpected, that people were picking up on that. And I think the reason why they were picking up on it, and again, is like you behave a certain way and then you don't realize that that behavior will create this sort of like additional like snowball effect, I guess is the way I would look at it, of how it's really going all the way down and really impacting at the end of that hill with the client. And the reason why this particular client came and told me this is because she's like, you're one of the few companies that I know that their technicians, who are people on the field, have been with you forever. Any other company, there's such a big turnover of technicians that come in and go out, and they all speak so highly of the company, and the way they describe the company, they're happy. And they're like, we don't see that with other companies and their technicians. And I would have never thought that that was going to even be noticed by a client, but they noticed that. And at the end of the day, even your technicians on the field are your representatives. And if they're happy, a client notices it, right? And if they're disgruntled, a client will notice it. They are the face of the company. And that's the way I always describe my technicians. I'm like, every single one of you young fellows are the face of our company. And I always tell them that. And I'm kind of like their mama bear, right? I like their and I'm always like, I always have their backs too. Like, as an example, during COVID, I remember talking to you, Daniela, at that time when you were in the banking industry, and we were talking about the tellers and how, what were they called? Necessary, like what were they called? Like essential
workers.
Labor, yeah.
Yeah. And our technicians were similar. They had special permits to be out there working. And then you were like, oh, they are giving them, I don't remember what it was, a very small fee weekly in order to be doing what they're doing. And then I started laughing because I was like, oh, you should see the bonuses I'm giving my technicians as a small company. And you should like, you're giving them what? And I was like, because again, they are the face of my company. They're going into long-term care homes at that time and servicing their security in such a high-risk environment that they were willing themselves to put in that position. And I have to say, not one single one of them ever complained or said, I'm not going to go into those. Not one of them. Like, they're so unbelievable. And I think that's when you reap the benefits of what you've done over the years without even realizing that you have done that.
That's amazing. Have you ever had situations, Azin, where you felt like you were being taken advantage of, either from your employees or customers? Well, first of all, how do you recognize that? And then B, from a soft approach, how do you address it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And 100%, there will be people that will take advantage of this software style of leadership, or they're taking advantage of that software style of leadership. But again, it's interesting. Like, I don't like the word of soft and hard, to be honest. I would prefer saying kind leadership, intelligent leadership. Those are words that I would prefer to be calling it, because they define it as soft. And soft for them means, well, I can do what I want to do, and this person is not going to even notice because they're so soft, they're so flaky, they're like the tree-hugging type personality, and they immediately put you in that box. But having that kind of kind leadership, if anything, because you're kind, you have a high EQ, buddy. I am seeing things that you don't think I'm seeing, right? It goes both ways. You have that intuition, you have that ability of seeing things. You might not react to it by being like, how dare you do this? But rather you go to them and have a conversation. And yeah, you have that those tough conversations. And there have been cases where they have made certain comments that are not acceptable. And in the meeting, I have no issues being like, I don't think that's acceptable. And I say very politely, very nicely, without, raising my voice or, those typical rah mentality of a strong leadership. I won't do it that way, but I've had to fire people because of that poor attitude. It's not easy to do that 100%, but at the same time, they were not adjusting to the cultural environment. They were not understanding. Sometimes it's not a good fit for people. They're so entrenched in that culture, and that work culture over decades of working in that world of bureaucratic, hierarchical world, it's hard for certain people to adjust to different type of leadership. And I don't fault them for that, but they're just not a good fit for my company. And that's what it all comes down to, cultural fit. And I don't fault them for it, but it's just not who I want in my group.
Yeah, no, totally get that. I just use the term that my spider senses we're firing off and something's not right here.
Right? Exactly.
I also find too that in the team situation where you start soft and then there's a moment where you have to course correct somebody, I've always found that when that moment comes, that course correction is respected so much more than if I was a fear-based leader. And I've had a handful of situations where I always used to tell my teams that when you start, listen, like my trust isn't yours to gain, it's yours to lose. If I hired you, I trust you. And that creates such a different mindset of how people approach work. Then when the moment comes, or if the moment comes, where you do have to course correct and say, hey, that's not okay. We're not going to do this again. It clicks for them of like, oh, is this the moment of like, I could potentially be losing trust because I already have it and I don't want to. And it's taken so much more seriously, but also with so much more respect. You just get further as a team, as a unit, delivering in those moments, you get further than if I had been a fear-based leader.
100%.
Absolutely. The other part that's really sparked for me as we talk about that contrast of hard power versus soft power. I hate the word soft power. As we were prepping for this call, it evokes this idea to me of like weakness and incapability. And that's not true. To me, as I kind of reflect on our conversation here, there's autocratic, do as I say, execute, blah, blah. We know that very well. But then there's a human-centric. I care about you as a person. I trust you to do the job. You are capable. You wouldn't have a seat at the table if we thought you weren't, or if I thought you weren't supposed to be here. Like, to me, there's that confidence building that starts to come out. And I really wish leaders would almost look within themselves to say, well, like, why am I here? Why do I have a seat at the table? And how do I create that acceptance, almost like bringing people into the fold to know that they also belong? Because again, I go use the analogy of the sailing team. They all have a seat at the table because they're all capable. They were picked to be that team. And they're going to, yes, there could be some autocratic styles with the captain, what have you. But at the end of the day, you're going to all come to each other's support. And as I'm just kind of going off on my soapbox here, the other thing that came up for me was, as an individual contributor, you also have an accountability. You don't necessarily have to have people reporting into you, but you have an accountability to also show that human-centric side. And here's to, again, my project managers, change managers out there, anyone dealing with business transformation consultants. You're at the table because you're believed to have the skill set, but you also have to create an environment. And it is about trusting others. And also when someone does something that may seem inappropriate, trusting that you have the right words to tell them that it was inappropriate. And it's not going to be soft power at that point. It is going to be the human-centric. What are the right words? Not responding with petty aggressiveness or whatever, passive-aggressive behaviors, but rather picking words to say, hey, in that moment, this came up. Can we have a chat about it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. You have my trust is there for you to lose, that Misha, that you mentioned. It's so important, that component of it. And then to add to that, as a leader, showing your accountability yourself, like, and showing your vulnerability and showing that, hey, I made a mistake there. You're absolutely right. Because if you show that is like, I'm not always right either, that creates that environment that people come and tell you when a mistake has happened ahead of it being caught. And I always tell my team, you're all human. We all make mistakes. Always bring it to me right away when you realize there was a mistake that happened, versus me finding out after the fact or the client finding out before we correct it. And part of that is creating that safe environment where they don't feel like if they come and tell you something like that they would be reprimanded for it, but rather they'll be like an understanding of it And how do we make sure that doesn't happen again and have those conversations? And that could be a mistake from a technical perspective. It could be a mistake from a behavioral perspective. I've had cases where a client was being extremely rude to one of my employees and they hung up the phone and they came to me and they're like, oh my God, I hung up on the phone with a client. And I'm like, well, what happened? And like this happened. I'm like, well, actually, you did the right thing. I was like, I would have hung up too. You know?
Not going to penalize you for hanging up. Now let's go and have a conversation with the client.
Right. And I was like, and they were like literally so upset and worried about what they'd done, more so than being upset at this particular client being very toxic towards them. They were more worried about hanging up. And I had to sort of reframe their mindset and be like, no. You should be upset at the client speaking to you this way. The fact that you hung up, right?
Good for you.
Right. But that's the part that they felt comfortable to come and tell me that right away, rather than the client calling me and be like, your employee just hung up on me. I already knew what had happened. So when the client did call, because obviously they were going to call me, I already knew the context. I already knew what had happened from the perspective of my employee. And I had to tell the client, by the way, no, this behavior was unacceptable on your end.
And that's the KPI.
And that's the KPI. Exactly. And it was because, again, it's an environment it's an environment where they see me continuously say, oh, shit, guys, I forgot this. Like, I'm sorry, and being able to say that, I think, apologize as a leader to your staff is something that does not happen normally.
What do you mean apologize? I don't make mistakes.
Yeah, we all make mistakes, but most leaders don't do that.
Very true. Very true.
They don't. They will not say, oh my God, that was on me. Sorry, let's figure this out, that kind of thing. Right. And that's exactly it. It comes up in situations when you least expect it again, like that those KPIs start emerging in the most unusual situations that you wouldn't be expecting because of those little things you've done over day in and day out in the work environment.
Yeah. I use the expression that's part of my DNA. It's part of my DNA. I can't be autocratic. If you make a mistake, the first step is how do we recover? It isn't why did you do it? Why did you go wrong? Why don't you understand? That autocratic style of you screwed up. And again, we prevent people from actually coming up with creative ways of resolving problems. Also by creating that fear and that lack of trust in each other.
Yeah, you pointed something perfect there, Daniela, is the creative solutions. Creativity cannot happen in a situation where you feel like you're boxed in. If you feel like this is like exactly what my responsibilities are, this is what I've been told, and that happens again in a very hierarchical, autocratic environment where everybody's like, this is as far as I'm going to go. I'm never going to go outside this box. And that creativity can only happen if they feel safe to go outside of that box. And I think you nailed it right there, because most of the times when bad things happen or wrong things happen or whatever the mistakes that have happened, most of my staff comes in and says, this has happened, but I think we can fix it this way. They come in with a solution rather than a problem, because you've given them that ability to feel comfortable to, first of all, come and tell you I made a mistake. And secondly, they've already started thinking about how am I going to fix it?
Yeah, that's brilliant, actually, because that why question to me is the worst question around. Like, why did this happen? Because you're just looking back and people get on the defensive. So if you just say, just tell me what happened and how do we move forward? You don't worry about pointing fingers or blah, 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 blah. It's more about, okay, this happened. Let's not worry about that part. Let's just move how we're going to correct it going forward. So that was beautiful. Just beautiful to allow them to have this creativity to know how to address something. That's excellent.
It's water under the bridge at that point.
It is, because you can't change it, right?
Like, what are we going to do now? It's like a mistake has happened. I mean, yes, at the end of the project or whatever, we'll revisit it when everything has been fixed. You're like, okay, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. 100%. That review has to happen. But it'll be in a much more calmer mindset. It will not be in a defensive, the person goes immediately on the defensive. They shut down. What did you hear you at that point?
Yeah, you need to be reflective.
Yeah.
It's people being reflective, not defensive. So for sure.
Yeah.
So I got to try. This has been an amazing conversation, Azin. So glad you were able to join us. We do like to do a little wrap up at the end here. So I'm going to ask Misha and Daniela what takeaways they have from this, and then I'm going to give you the final word. So Misha, Daniela, what takeaways do you have from our conversations with Azin?
First, I feel very validated in my leadership style after today's conversation. But I actually want to go back to something Daniela said, and it was that negative connotation that can come up when we say soft power. And I'd like to offer to our listeners this thought, which is if we were to sit on a couch made out of bricks, that wouldn't be very comfortable. If we were to sleep on a pillow made out of a cement block, that wouldn't be very comfortable. And on the reverse, if we were to build a house out of foam, it probably wouldn't stay up very long. And so I say all of this in the sense of, sure, our framings can sometimes need to be a little bit harder, but what we engage in every single day in a workplace is so much softer in material than I think we recognize most of the time. And so in that connotation, think about where you might be able to offer a little bit of that softer material, that softer approach, because you need the balance of soft and hard. You cannot just have one or the other, but soft is missing. It's not even missing. It's just you don't realize that it needs to be there the same way you need a soft couch or a fluffy pillow to sleep on. And so think about where you could offer a thank you, or, hey, I appreciate you for getting back to me for this, or, hey, I see that you have gone above and beyond and did this, and I just want to say thank you. I see you. I appreciate you. And start implementing that in your style. And you don't have to be a leader by title to be able to do that.
Beautiful.
I love that, Misha. That's such a great analogy. I think for me, I've always struggled in the type of roles that I've had because my peers have always been, as a project leader, as a project delivery executive, you need to be sticking them to the timeline and you need to execute and you need to be hard on them. They're not delivering, and for me, that was never authentic. It never fit my mold. And even to this day, with the roles that I've taken on, what I've realized, and I love the fact that as you came and joined us today and shared so much of your brilliance, because you've put out what I've struggled with sometimes to put out in words. And that's that we all are human. The idea that you can't create a collaborative trust environment with high psychological safety is untrue. And it's in each of us to bring forth that human side of ourselves, whether we're leading people, we're leading an initiative, we're showing up as a champion for something in the workplace, we're showing up in front of clients. We want to do the right thing. Lead with your human side and bring that forward, and you will not be penalized for it. Because if you are penalized for it, it's not the right place for you.
Yeah, I was just saying, having seen a whole gambit of different management styles, and I have worked for the military for a couple of years, and I do believe that there is a place for the autocratic style. And I totally understand that. But again, it's a time and place. It's not always valid. And so shifting, and people have changed. People have changed a lot. So moving from a more autocratic style to a more human style, I'll put it, because the softer style too, it's a tough word. And I don't know if I agree with it wholeheartedly either, with as you all had mentioned. But you do need to be more of a human manager, because remember, you're working with intelligent human beings. And so if you let them know that we're all in this together, we're part of a team, this whole command and control type of environment, it doesn't work, and you'll get the best out of your people, and you'll get a longer retention, you'll get their buy-in, and you'll actually be the whole team. Because as you mentioned earlier, Azin, the technicians, the service people we have out there, they're a reflection of you and the company. And so you have to never forget that, right? Because if they're happy, that will come across to your clients. They'll come across within the whole culture and the psychological safety of being in that environment. So you need to shift, and you need to understand when you need to be a bit more autocratic and when you need to be much more softer, but hopefully the softer side wins over the autocratic side on generally most times. So thank you for this. Yeah. Azin, any last thoughts? Impart with us with your wisdom.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, all of you, for having me with you today. It's been such a pleasure speaking to all of you and hearing your perspectives. I've learned so much from all of you today as well. And I think that the last thing I want to leave people with is really fundamentally, do not let go of what you value. That's what it really comes down for me personally, and I really want to convey that to the listeners, is you spend such a large time of your life at work. So you want to model it on what you want rather than what you're being told on what it should be. I think that it really is, for me, what it comes down to is you want to be in an environment where you enjoy yourselves, whatever that environment might be that you truly thrive in, create that. Regardless of what your role is in the company, you can create that. And if the company doesn't respond to that, as Danielle has said, then that is not the right fit for you. But ultimately, create that. Don't be told on what it should be, ever.
Thanks for listening to The Coaching Divas. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review and follow us on Instagram at The Coaching Divas.
Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it.
Until next time, we are
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, The Coaching Divas.
If you're going to coach, might as well coach like a diva.